Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Happy Thursday. Feel free as you're joining to take a peek at the icebreaker and start forming a coffee opinion. Today's icebreaker is to think about what coffee chain is your favorite. I try to pick some that are pretty regional. Oh, all right. Dunkin' and Starbucks, first two coming in. That feels accurate. What else? What else? I try to pick the big ones, but I feel like there are smaller regional coffee chains out there. If you feel passionate about one, feel free, drop it in the chat, maybe introduce us to a new one. Always on the hunt. No one else has a favorite coffee chain? I refuse to believe that's true. I know y'all have a favorite coffee chain. Karu, yeah. I feel like I always forget about it, and it always does the job. Ooh, another Dunkin'. Oh, all right. We got a Dutch Bros. We got a don't like coffee entirely. Oh.
We're both like, oh.
I don't know. Which coffee chain has the best pastry?
Tea, maybe, or a tea person?
Yeah. I feel like I would definitely go to Starbucks if I wanted a non-coffee drink, but I don't think I would go to Dunkin' if I wanted a non-coffee drink. You know? Oh, got another Dutch Bros.
Yeah, I might get a tea from Starbucks after this. Too late in the day now for coffee. 4 p.m. Eastern time right now. So if anyone wants a tea suggestion, if you're not a coffee person, I'll take that.
Where is Caribou? I feel like random pockets all over the place. Did I Google a map of coffee chains and what regions they're from for the icebreaker? I might have. Caribou is like not specific to one. There's one in Greensboro, North Carolina. Yeah, I know there's some in like Nebraska where I'm from. They're like randomly all over the place.
I've seen some in Michigan, but very few and far between.
Yeah, they just kind of pop up.
I think they used to be more popular. I feel like I used to see more of them, and now I don't see as many.
That feels right. The Starbucks and Dunkin' coming for the Caribou. Okay, we'll give everyone like 30 more seconds if any other friends are joining us before we jump on in. No Tim Hortons fans?
Right. We didn't see any of those.
That's all right. That's all right. They can be at the bottom of our list. They can't all be winners. Okay. I think we can go ahead and start. And if anyone joins late, that is a-okay. Hello. Welcome to our first outreach session of the day, third session of Virtual Summit. Drop a smiley face, asterisk, thumbs up in the chat if you attended a session yesterday. Okay. Paparazzi. I'm seeing some reactions. Fun, amazing. Welcome back. If you didn't, welcome. My name is Alaska. I am a senior program coordinator for our chapters in North Carolina and Virginia, and my favorite coffee chain is Dunkin', but I recently moved out west and Dunkin' does not exist. So I'm struggling a little bit. I need to get on the Dutch Bros train, but I'm not there yet.
Hi, I'm Slim. I'm a program coordinator for Southern California schools, plus ASU and WCU. So some bonus states in there also. It can't just generalize as SoCal. My favorite coffee chain is called Big B Coffee. I don't know if they're they're pretty specific to Michigan. I know I've seen a few in Indiana and Ohio, but I believe they were started in Michigan. But Starbucks will be my close second for that.
I love that. A Michigan gal.
Through and through.
Amazing. Okay. Quick intro to what we are going to talk about for the next 56 minutes together. Hopefully you're aware we're going to talk about camper applications in our intake process and how we can use this information and this process to be super prepared for camp. So something that we want to think about before we jump into the nitty gritty is KESM's DI statement and our DI commitment. One way that we really ensure that this plays out, and it's something that we're really following through, is actually our application and intake process. In a normal year, we receive over 12,000 camper applications. That's so many children who are applying for our programs. And there are a good amount of those applications that are flagged for different intake priorities, campers who need different accommodations in order to have a good camp experience. Or camper families or campers who are applying, and there might be some barriers in place for them before they can attend, where we're collecting that information to provide support, provide the appropriate accommodations so that all of those campers can attend and that they can have a great camp experience. So everything involved in the application and intake process is really set up really intentionally to ensure all of our campers are going to have a good experience during our programs, and that we are able to use the resources that are available to us, whether it's staff, whether it's supplies, campsite capabilities, all of that jazz. And then just to note that this specific session will go through an overview of the intake life cycle, what's happening behind the scenes, what information we're collecting, where to find it, but we won't necessarily get to the point where we're able to walk through really specific ways to accommodate campers. Okay, so oh, Slim, go ahead.
Thank you. So first we're going to start in breakout rooms. Why don't you, once we assign them, you can introduce yourself, what chapter you're from, and then we will also give you some notes so that you don't have to remember this once you go in the breakout rooms, but just start chatting. What concerns or questions do you have about being prepared for camp this summer? What about questions around the camper application process? Any questions you have about ensuring that counselors, especially new counselors, feel prepared for camp? And then any gaps in your knowledge about camper applications and the process that they go through. So we will put you in some breakout rooms. We will give you these questions, just kind of discuss and come with, what questions do you have or things that you're unsure about with the camper application process?
Welcome back. Brilliant. Cheese Nut for some, I can't see when everyone is back, so you can give me like a thumbs up when everyone is back so I don't start talking. That would be great. All right, we're trickling in. Welcome, welcome. Okay.
Oh, there's still one more room. Oh, they should all be back now. Welcome back.
Well, amazing. We're all back. How'd it go? Does anyone have anything? Maybe you all were aligned on one thing everyone had a question about that you can either drop in a chat or you can just unmute and share out.
Something that our group talked about was just kind of conserving your energy for all of camp. The only in-person camp I've done was fall programming, and I feel like my voice was kind of dead after 2 days. So I feel like doing a full week or maybe 2 weeks of camp, it would just be hard to keep up all of the energy.
Totally fair. That endurance is important. Same for our little kiddos. Yeah. They run out of steam too. Heck yeah. Anyone have any like commonly shared questions about camper applications? Or anyone had like a really good question that you hadn't thought about? Let's do like one more example. You can also just put it in the chat if you want. You don't have to share out. That's okay.
This wasn't really a question, but it was kind of just like a common concern that we all felt like throughout our group.
Yeah.
But it was just like the nervousness around camp because like barely anyone in our chapter has like attended an in-person camp. So just like going through like that whole process and actually doing camp like with kids together in person, it's like really nerve-wracking and we're just not really sure what to expect.
So fair, so valid. Yeah, anytime you do something that feels new, it's going to feel a little bit scary, especially something that feels as big as camp feels. Is like we're in charge of like other human children for a whole week and like multiple nights, and what does that look like? And have definitely taken advantage or like in years past where we've done it year after year and we know our campers really well, where like maybe making accommodations for some of those kiddos just comes like second nature because we already know these campers. And this year might be feel like we're starting from scratch. That is a super valid concern. If anyone can pop like a smiley face or something in the chat if you feel similarly, just like feeling nervous for like what to expect and how to be prepared. All right, Ocean says yes. Oh, yep. All right, okay. We're all feeling it. And that's totally okay. I'm feeling it. I think that's a really natural thing to feel. Hopefully after this, we'll feel a little bit better just with knowing like what information you do have access to. So at least when we're thinking about preparing to support our campers, that you have all the information that you need at your fingertips. Cool. Some of you want to take us on to the next slide. Okay. And now we're going to start to dive into our like application process. And we're going to start with talking about who is on our team, going through the humans who are involved in this process. There are a lot of humans who are involved in this process. The first one are camper families. Hopefully this is a role that you all are semi-familiar with. These are the humans who are filling out the application for the campers. They're the ones who are either returning and are familiar with KESM, or they just found out about KESM and they're applying for the first time. When they sit down to fill out an application for KESM, they should be providing us tons of details about their kiddo so that we can know who the kiddo is, what they need, what they like. And then they rely on student leaders, aka y'all, to give them information so that they can be prepared leading up to camp. And then we have our intake volunteers, and sometimes we'll use the abbreviation IV. So if you see that, know that that is synonymous for our intake volunteers. These are alumni and sometimes current student volunteers who are trained specifically in our intake process to review camper applications, and they'll either approve them or they'll catch like gaps where we need more information. So these are humans who are on the back end once a family approves it, and they're going through and they've been trained in how to review applications. And then we have camper follow-up volunteers who are also alumni volunteers trained in our intake process. And then they will contact the family, as their name hints what their role is. They'll contact the family to follow up with them and gather more information if the application didn't have a lot of details, or there's something that we need to confirm before we approve them or before we move the application along. We have specific volunteers who are doing that and collecting that information before applications get pushed along. And then we have y'all, our student leaders. You are the ones who are going to be on the receiving end of all of the applications. And are in charge of communicating with our camper families, making sure answering their questions, making sure they know when and where camp is and where to show up and what to bring. One way we'll do that, we'll get to this a little bit later. Sneak peek, our camper orientation calls. and also making sure that we're combing through the applications to see the information camper follow-up volunteers have collected to make sure it's on our radar and that we can take those accommodation plans that are already built out and make sure that we're the ones who are implementing them. And then we also have camp advisors, our health and wellness team members, PCs, campsite staff, all of these other humans who can be involved in this process, depending on what accommodations are needed. So we got a big team, a lot of people involved. Okay, we're gonna break this down and we're gonna really go through step by step of a life cycle of a camper application. So step one, somebody has to fill out an application. Step one is a camper family sits down, maybe they have one kiddo, they open up the KESM Central, they log in, they fill out the application, and then they'll hit submit. Once they hit submit, the application can do two different things. One is it can get auto approved, meaning that a human doesn't have to review it and our system knows that there's nothing in the application that needs to be flagged and it will just automatically get updated to be approved. This usually happens to a lot of our returning campers where they've come to KESM for a while. We have a lot of their information on file. We know them, we don't need any more information. It helps the process move a lot faster. And two, if there is more information in the application where our system's like, oh, they checked that box, maybe we need to check it, or they're a new family, it won't get auto reviewed and it will go for general intake review. This is where our intake volunteers come in. Any application that wasn't auto approved, our intake volunteers comb through, they sit down and they scroll through application one by one, being a real human so they can review it. And what they'll do initially is they'll make sure that that camper whose application they're reviewing is eligible for our program. So they'll make sure that the person who is impacted by cancer in the camper's family is actually their primary guardian, and the application isn't like their aunt is diagnosed with cancer and their aunt lives 2 states away. If that aunt isn't actually their primary caregiver, then that camper wouldn't be eligible for our program. Make sure their notes in the application are really detailed and not like one-word answers, and that we have all of the information that we need. If there are any accommodation plans in there, we'll make sure that they're actually filled out completely. And sometimes families in the application can request to have follow-up. So if that's something that they've requested, intake volunteers will note that as well. And then if families have marked that they need any assistance with some supplies before camp, transportation, and make sure we have information about that. So intake volunteers really just review the application and see if they can catch any gaps in it. What happens next, step 3, is if they catch a gap in it, sometimes they'll just review it and they'll be like, that looks great. Actually, all the information we need is there, approve. Or they might be like, that section of the application, we need more information. Doesn't look as detailed as we would want it to be. Then we get on to step 3, where our camper follow-up volunteers fill in the gaps. They're gonna actually contact the family and say, hey, it looks like your camper has a specific accommodation plan for, looks like they broke their arm a year ago, they're still in physical therapy and can't participate in some sports activities. Walk me through some examples of what some sports activities are that they shouldn't participate in. How do they handle it at school, making sure we have all the information we need. So then when they arrive to camp, we're fully prepared. While that's happening, they'll take all of this extra info and they'll update it directly in the application. This way we have note of it. It lives in the same place with where the other information lives. And they'll confirm eligibility also. So maybe the intake volunteer was like, this camper's aunt is the one with the cancer diagnosis. We should double check to see if they're eligible. Maybe that aunt is that camper's primary caregiver. Totally fine. They will be eligible. Move it along. Or maybe they're not, and we'll let the family know that they're not eligible. Usually that happens very, very rarely and is only due to circumstances like that. So once that happens, we have all the information we need. Camper follow-up volunteer has collected it from the family. They've updated the application. They approve it. And then it goes into step 4, which is where you come in. We have camper orientation calls, which are utilized to make sure we're looking at every application and that we have collected all of the information, and it's only going to be helpful if we read it. ahead of time. It won't be helpful if it's just sitting in the application, camp starts tomorrow, and we're like, oh crap, that camper has an allergy to eggs. Totally forgot to look at that. Camp is in 12 hours. What are we supposed to do? These orientation calls are going to ensure that we open each application one at a time and we check in with the family to see if they have any questions, that they know where to go. If they've marked that they need help getting a sleeping bag, we can ask them, what size sleeping bag? Can we just have it for you at camp? All of the fine-tuned details that camper volunteers wouldn't have collected, y'all will collect during this. This is really everyone benefit situation where you're getting information and the camper family is getting information. And then our last step is taking all this information and acting on it. It also isn't going to be helpful if we're sitting on a bunch of information about campers and what they need and what they aren't able to do, and then we don't actually tell anyone else. We're going to get to camp and nothing's going to happen. And some campers might not have a good experience. Some campers might have to leave early. Some counselors are probably not going to have a good experience because they're not prepared in how to support the campers in their unit. So step 5, arguably the most important step, is making sure we're taking this information, communicating it to other people, and putting these plans into place. So there are a bunch of steps, and not every camper application goes through all of the steps. Some of them go from step 1 and they get auto approved, and then they jump right to camper orientation calls. Some of them go through step 1, they get reviewed by an intake volunteer, and then they get approved. And some applications go through every single step before they get approved, and we're able to do the orientation calls. So I believe on the next slide, we have a handy dandy little visual.
We do. Yeah. So this really shows where Alaska was just saying not every step is going to be taken. So they all will start at 1 and they will all see steps 4 and 5. But there's some gray in between areas that not every application will see the exact same things in between. So could go from step 1 when the camper applies right to auto approved, and then you'll make the orientation calls and implement at camp. Some of them have some extra steps in between that won't necessarily be taken by you, by the student leaders. They'll be taken by either an intake volunteer or a camper follow-up volunteer, but they'll be collecting the information for you, and then you'll make the camper orientation call and implement at camp. So regardless of what steps are taken in between the application being submitted and you getting the application, you'll still be making the orientation call and you'll still be implementing at camp so that all campers can have the best week possible.
Cool. Okay. Before we move on, wait, go back. Actually, I want to keep looking at that diagram because it's beautiful as a visual learner myself. Can everyone put in the chat, let's just do scale of 1 to 5, of how confident we feel in like understanding this life cycle and the steps in the process. 1 being, what in the world are these words? What do they just say? I have no idea. All I know is applications show up in KESM Central. 5 being, totally understand, got it. This makes a lot of sense. I know what's happening behind the scenes. Oh, wow. Okay, 4s and 5s. Okay. Okay. That's not too shabby. Not too shabby at all. Cool. All right. We can work with that. Okay, so now you can go on to the next slide. Thank you. Brilliant. Okay. We're going to do a deeper dive. Obviously, the last 2 years, our camper applications and the information that we've needed have looked a little bit different than what they're going to look like this year, because KESM at Home looks a little bit different than a week of overnight camp. So if we have to think about this process last year or the year before, and campers are applying for KESM at Home, and there might be some information that we need so we can support them for KESM at Home. What would maybe be some examples of information that we need to support families for just KESM at Home? What do we think?
Internet availability.
Yeah, love. That's a great one. One pretty common was like how many devices they have, especially if they have multiple campers. Are they sharing a device? Do they have enough where each camper gets their own device? And sometimes like if there was a specific time or day that they weren't available, that would be good to know too. But other than that, there really isn't that much information that we need in order to support families for Kesem at Home compared to information that we need before camp to support families for camp. Because camp is totally different from Kesem at Home. We are these campers full-time caretakers for a whole week. We feed them all of their meals. We put them in new and different environments. They're meeting a bunch of new people. There's a lot of information that we're going to need in order to take care of these real life human children. So what would maybe be some examples of information we would need before camp to take care of campers? You can either unmute and share out or just drop it in the chat.
Like their allergies and medications and that sort of thing.
Totally. Allergies, eating restrictions. Yeah. Like if a camper is allergic to eggs, we probably don't want to give them eggs while they're at camp. That's a good one. Or if they're allergic to peanut butter, probably should make sure our snacks for that camper don't have peanut butter. Rainbow pronouns, that is a really great one. Mobility restrictions, yeah. That's a great one. Nighttime routines, yeah, that's a great one, 100%. Same with, please, I know you mentioned this earlier, like medications, if they have a specific medication that they have to take every night, that's something that we're gonna need to know. Or a specific medication they take every morning and night, something that we have to know. Sensory challenges, oh my gosh, yeah, that is a great one. If we know a camper is gonna like have an anxiety attack, if they're in a really loud environment, maybe we can set up a system where they're eating meals outside of the dining hall with a couple counselors. That's in a little bit of a quieter room, and then we can avoid that camper having an anxiety attack. Nobody wants that. That is a super good one. These are really great. Yeah, there's a lot of information. We could probably spend the next 40 minutes coming up with things that would be helpful for us to know. Like if they have siblings, what their relationship with their siblings are like. Sometimes there's a little camper who feels really, really attached to their older sibling and really wants to make sure that they have time to connect with them. If a camper has had like recent mental health concerns in the last year, we should know about that and how we can support them. Any like behavior management strategies. Sometimes campers already have like behavior management plans for school. Probably be helpful for us to know for camp. Tons of things. Love. Okay, so now that we know the things that we're going to be able to find in applications, all of this information, we know that intake volunteers and camper follow-up volunteers help ensure we have this information. But where does it live? How do we find it? Maybe you're wondering. That's a great question. We have some screenshots of some fake camper applications. This is what it will look like on your view in Kesem Central. If you log in as an outreach coordinator to Kesem Central, you go to your approved camper applications and you open one up, it will look just like this. So at the very top, we'll be able to see a lot of general information. We'll be able to see the camper's name, if they have a Kesem name, and they can enter their pronouns here, their home phone, their home address. We can see the application status, so we can make sure that they're approved. If they're not approved, we should be able to see that as well. And then some of you want to take us to the next slide. And then we'll also get a lot of information about camper background, so we can see their date of birth, their age, what school they attend, and what grade they're in. We can see at the top here this little checkbox that says if they've attended Camp Kesem before. This is really helpful. And we can also see how many years they've attended Kesem before. So maybe we're going to have some campers like this one who have attended camp or Kesem for 2 years, which means they probably attended Kesem at Home the last 2 years and never camp. But we might have some campers who have attended 6 years. We might have some brand new families. If we can know what our makeup of our returning and new families are, that will be really helpful. Whoever is filling out the application for the camper, gets to put a little description, so we can have a little summary of the camper and how they describe their kiddo. We can also see at the bottom left here, it says if they've ever been away from home without a parent or guardian. This is really helpful, especially for our little kiddos. Sometimes we'll have like a little 6 or 7-year-old and they've never been away from home before. Then we can go in before camp, maybe with a flag of like, this camper has a really high chance of like being really homesick because we know they've never left home without their parents before. Maybe we can be really proactive about preventing homesickness for that kiddo, rather than we're on day 3 and this camper is having a horrible time and we're like, why are they just so miserable? And then we realize it's because this is their first time away from home. We can know right now. Okay, this is where we get into a lot of the extra information that will play into accommodation plans. So you'll see there are a lot of questions here, and then there's a little spot for a checkbox. So if they're filling out an application for their kiddo and they're like, yes, there are some mental health concerns, they'll check the box and then some questions will pop up for them below. Right now it's blank because the box isn't checked where it says if they're currently receiving mental health care and mental health accommodations. If they check the box, they'll be prompted to fill that out. This is what Camper Follow-Up volunteers really are checking. So if a family checked the box and they're filling out the questions with like one-word answers, really minimal information, it's going to end up not being super helpful. So then they might call the family and say, hey, I'm reviewing so-and-so's application. I just wanted to run through their mental health accommodations and ask some follow-up questions to make sure we're getting a little bit more information there. Same with all these other checkboxes. If they're filling out the application and it is relevant for their kiddo, they'll check it and they'll be prompted to fill out some follow-up questions. Ideally, in a perfect world, they're giving us a bunch of information. Sometimes they don't, and that's why we have to follow up to fill it in after the fact. So if we go to the next slide, I believe we have some examples, yes, of what it looks like when they do check the box. So let's say these 2 examples here of this camper has any physical disabilities or limited vision or blindness, they'll check the box. And then you can see there are some prompted questions here and we can read what that guardian or parent's response is. So on the left-hand side, we'll see they're prompted to answer, can you describe your child's physical limitations? It looks like this camper can't participate in anything that has balls throwing to where she can hit her head. That is important to know. If we have kickball planned, maybe we want to definitely plan ahead where this camper can have like a backup activity so that a ball doesn't end up hitting her in the head, because that feels important. Same on the other side here. Please describe your child's sight abilities. She starts to see double a lot closer than or further away than everyone else, and she has contacts. That might be really helpful to know, especially if we have like pool or lake time, especially if she doesn't want to lose her contacts or she doesn't have a backup pair. A lot of information that is really helpful for us in here. Here's another example. So let me go to the next slide. Oh, here we go. I think there was one more, maybe. Maybe not. Does it work?
A moment.
Just a little refresh. Ah, yes. Okay, brilliant. That's perfect. Okay, then there's a specific section. If we're pretending we're viewing this application in Kesem Central right now, we're really scrolling. You have to make sure that you really scroll through the whole application because it is pretty long because there's a lot of information. These are just some specific snippets, not everything that lives in the application. So there is a section closer to the bottom that is specific to camper at camp support. A lot of these things y'all mentioned in the chat about like assistance needed or allergies or dietary restrictions. Or even like related to pronouns, if they have a specific like gender cabin that they would prefer, they can mark that here. So if they need any assistance with transportation, supplies, they can check that and choose what specifically they need assistance with. They can give us a little bit more information. So it looks like they need assistance with transportation, either help solidifying a bus or a gas card. If they need supplies for camp, they can mark that and specifically what supplies. Looks like this camper needs support getting bedding, closed-toed shoes, and extra clothes that they can get messy in. We might need to call the family during the camper orientation calls and say, hey, what size shoe is your camper? Is it okay if we have a bag just at camp ready to go for this camper with all the things that you've requested? They'll also mark if they have any allergies, what type of allergies, how severe it is, and then some more information here. So it's important to know if a camper knows they're aware of their allergy or if they're not aware, and they're going to need someone to walk through the food line with them to make sure they avoid fish and shellfish, or if they can do it on their own. This information is really helpful too. Okay, I think that's, yes. Okay, so there's a lot of information in applications and we have access to view all of it. We know it is essential to be familiar with every application that we have, so we know the information that lives in them. Ensure we have everything we need for camp. If there's something specific that camper we know has contacts, is not able to play activities where a ball might hit them in the head, we need to make sure that we're communicating that to the unit leader, maybe putting together some backup plans to support that camper. And we need to make sure the family has everything that they need for camp. If they have any specific questions, maybe they want to see, are there any games where this camper can get hit in the head with a ball? We're really worried about it. What would happen if they are playing kickball? And then you can say, oh, we're going to have board games over to the side with a couple of counselors and probably some other campers that don't want to participate. So she doesn't have to sit on the side and watch everyone. We need to know the information. We need to be prepared, and we need to make sure the family is prepared. The best way to make that happen, we've already touched on this, are camper orientation calls. And we haven't really done them this year. I'm not going to go into great depth because this is a plug for your next outreach session, is basically just walking through camper orientation calls. But just know that the purpose of these calls is to do those three things, is to make sure we're reviewing every application and absorbing the information. It provides a touch point with families after they apply, so they can ask follow-up questions. We can ask them follow-up questions, and make sure we're wrapping up a nice, pretty little bow on all the information that we might need before we start prepping for camp. Hopefully you'll get more information in the next outreach session if you all join. Okay, so we're gonna skip past it because you're gonna learn more later, and we're gonna pretend you finished all of your camper orientation calls. Excellent, great. Now what happens? This is the step 5. If we think back to that life cycle of we need to act on the information, otherwise it's not gonna be helping anyone. So a couple examples of what happens if we don't act on the information or we don't put these plans into place. So let's say your staff or your counselors don't know that their camper Cupcake, who's in their unit, is allergic to peanuts and needs help to stay away from them. Maybe Cupcake takes a bite of a brownie at lunch that has peanuts in them, and we might have to end up with a trip to the hospital. That can easily be avoided if we review the application, give the counselors and Cupcake's unit a heads up. Cupcake is allergic to peanuts and is not able to avoid them on her own. Please keep it on your radar. No peanuts for Cupcake. And then we don't have a trip to the hospital. Or maybe your counselors don't know that when Tree Frog is in a loud environment, they either shut down or they run away. If we're not aware of that, we could during meal times or camp songs, I think someone mentioned this in the chat earlier, we can end up with a camper that is really unhappy, or maybe they run away and they become unsafe. It's something that, if it's something that we do know, our counselors can be prepared, and maybe they can have like a little friendship bracelet making session happening over to the side while camp songs are happening. That's in a little bit of a quiet corner, and Tree Frog has a great time all week. Or maybe your counselors don't know that their camper Billy Goat has really severe anxiety. They've developed it since the last couple of years during the pandemic, but they recently got a therapist that's really been helping, and their parents think because we'll have an MHP at camp, that would be a really useful tool for them. If it's something that we don't know and we don't say, hey, MHP, Billy Goat would love to talk to you before dinner on the first day, Billy Goat could end up having really severe anxiety at camp, maybe making no friends, not participating. But we have this information, we can be aware of it, and then we can act on it, make a plan with our MHP, and then Billy Goat could have the best week ever. Okay. We can jump on to the next slide. I think we're gonna skip it. Okay, we're gonna do breakout rooms again. We're just gonna break you out into the same rooms that you were at the beginning. And I would love for y'all just to chat with each other and brainstorm like how we can do that. Focusing on step 5, knowing you have access to tons of information about every single camper in Kesem Central. How do we communicate this information to unit leaders and to other counselors? How do we make sure that your counselors are really prepared to take care of the campers in their unit? We're thinking about a timeline, like when would we want to make people aware of the information about the campers in their unit? Like a week before camp, 4 months before camp, the day before camp? When we want to start acting on that? Is there anyone else we need to collaborate with to make that happen? How do we take the information and act on it? And how do we prepare your people? Okay, we'll do it like 5 minutes, 5-6 minutes in your breakout rooms. Brainstorm. I will drop these questions in the chat so you can have them. And then we'll come back together. And if you have any really great ideas, please be prepared to share them with the group. See, okay. Amazing. Welcome back. How did it go? We'll just chat and share out for a couple of minutes before we wrap up. Did anyone land on any good thoughts or ideas of how we can inform unit leaders and other counselors and what timeline we're thinking? Again, feel free to just unmute or pop it in the chat, whatever you're feeling.
Our group kind of talked about binders and how probably like the night before you'd want to go through them with everybody, like to make sure it's fresh in everyone's head, counselor wise, but also just kind of like as soon as you can get the binders out to them, just to like give unit leaders and counselors as much time as, you know, even they think they need to prepare themselves. Just like as soon as you have it available, let them have it.
I love that. How do I write that? How do I make a new standard that says that? Yeah, ASAP, and maybe like a little refresh session the day before. If you like do it maybe 2 months before camp, some of those itty bitty details and like the specifics of the child descriptions and what allergies everyone has, that information would be super helpful to run through. And yeah, plug for binders. We love a good organized binder. Maybe it's like color coded, got tabs, organized alphabetically. If you start now, it can be the most organized, beautiful binder in the world, and your unit leaders will thank you forever. That was a great idea. Oh, I see one in the chat. Maybe include some scenarios during training based on specific things that unit leaders and counselors might face once we know about which campers are coming and what they'll need support with. Yes, that's great. Make your trainings really specific and relevant based off of who your campers are going to be. That's genius. I love that. Anything else? Is there anyone that you might have to work with or collaborate with to make all this happen?
I would say volunteer, just because everything that they do is counselor oriented. So making sure you're communicating with them and working with them to get that information out in the most like efficient way possible.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, collaborate with fall, sneak in there and include it in some of the trainings. And ops. Yeah, collaborate with ops. If there are specific supplies that we need or specific accommodations or things that we can just put into the schedule right now, we can put it on their radar and they can feel really in the loop. Volunteer outreach ops, AKA our camp prep dream team. I love that so much. That's excellent. Okay. Let me take us to our last slide, Slim, and we will wrap up. As we have 0 minutes left, this reflection you can do in the next 15 minutes before your last outreach session. Is thinking about some of these things. Anyone maybe specifically on your team that you want to clue into this process, maybe help like review and go through the camper applications with you. And think about if there's anything, any gaps in the information that you have, anything that you're curious or confused on that you want to learn more about. Carve out some time in the next couple of weeks to explore Custom Central, explore the Central Resources table. Okay, before we go, I would love if everyone can pick one thing that they learned in the last hour. It can be anything, big or small, and put it in the chat. Just one new piece of information that you have. Even if it's what an intake volunteer is. Yes. More information on the application process, camp orientation calls, application cycle. Yay. Learning has happened here today. That was our goal. Love it. Amazing. Have an excellent rest of your day / you'll all probably see each other in 15 minutes. Thanks, everyone.